All right, so today we're here with Mr. David Sword and on New Mexico Desert Classics. And one of the things, our first three videos were everything was just shooting a car. And cars are cool, but quite honestly, car people are cooler. So I'm going to get out from in front of the camera and get behind the camera. And I think it's really important, especially in today's day and age, that we capture stories from our early pioneers in the car industry. And I can tell you just from having hung out with Dave a couple of times that he's got some of the coolest car stories, some of the coolest war stories, some of the coolest life stories. And I think often in today's day and age we don't do enough to capture that and relay those stories. So Dave agreed to take an hour of his time out on a Saturday morning in probably his favorite place on the planet, in the shop, and so we're just gonna have a little bit of a chat. Let's transition just a little bit. As you mentioned, your son and yourself and his mom are all veterans, as are myself and all the other guys involved with this YouTube channel. Right now we've got a mix of active duty folks, and then Hi and myself are both Air Force veterans. What's your one? I could sit and listen to stories all day, but what's your favorite story to tell from your time in the military?
That's kind of hard to say. That's worse than the car question because I have so many of them. I've done a lot of different things. I was a crew chief for 4 years in the Air Force, and then I was a helicopter mechanic in the Army for 3 more years. Did depot level repairs and went to pilot training. And just about every day during pilot training, you got a story that you'd love to tell somebody, because that helicopter could sure humble you. And that was back when they had throttles. They don't have throttles no more, so these kids that call themselves helicopter pilots really aren't until they get a hold of a throttle. And then there's 2 tours in Vietnam, and there's some pretty wild stories over there. I guess the funniest story, it turned out to be funny, it wasn't funny at the moment, was we were on a combat assault, and I was Chalk 3, which at the time put me on the left side of the formation of 3 coming into an LZ. It was a small clearing in the jungle, and a VC ran out directly underneath me and was shooting straight up into my fuel cells. And naturally I started leaking pretty bad from everywhere. Luckily I wasn't, but the airplane was. And a good friend of mine come roaring in with a gunship, and his name was Ron Damron. He has passed away since, and quite a story about him too. He died as one of the head football coaches for the Texas college is in Lubbock. And he come roaring in, Texas Tech. He come roaring in and says, "Hold what you got, Dave, I'll get him." Well, I assumed that he would select guns. Instead, he put a pair of 2.75-inch rockets, HE, directly under me. And I was about 12 feet in the air. So you can imagine what happened to the helicopter. It just come apart. And I didn't travel far before I crashed. Luckily, nobody was hurt. The grunts got out and ran into the boonies. and the crew jumped out and ran to the other helicopter, and out we went. And then we ended up burning the helicopter that wasn't already burning. That was probably one of my most remembered stories, but I have some other ones.
Well, since you have other ones, go.
Well, we used to have a captain in our company, but he was just Captain Chris, and his name was Christopherson, and he was just a captain in our unit. He used to write a lot of songs. There's some famous ones called Blue Star 851, which I have a tape of, and Chopper Pilot's Day. He wrote that. There's several of them. And he was a fairly talented character. And he came home and got mixed up with Willie Nelson and that group, and wouldn't even admit he was even in the Army. Although he was a West Point graduate, a Rhodes Scholar, a hell of a good helicopter pilot, but he wouldn't even admit he was in the Army until just lately. He's now starting to do it. And but I was in a very, very good outfit. It's called the Blue Stars. We have an annual get-together every year, and it's getting to where it's less and less and less and less. COVID killed it last year. I didn't get to go this year, although I had airplane tickets and a motel room, but they also had a lot of COVID in Huntsville, Alabama, so I didn't get to go. But the last time I got to go was Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and they took me by surprise because during our great big banquet that we have at the end, they introduced all the generals in the room, because several people who were there as just young squirts, retired as generals. But then they introduced the very first Blue Stars and called my name. So that made me very proud.
That's awesome.
And to still be alive.
Sure.
That helps. That helps a lot. And it's kind of amazing that I am still alive. I've done a lot of things that should have put me in the ground. And the last thing was 3 massive heart attacks in one day.
Oof.
And I was dead twice, but they pulled me through it. And the last time I had anything go wrong with my heart was in 2011. And knock on my wood head, I'm glad I'm still here.
All right. So this one's a little different. What would you tell a young person getting into the car culture today about life?
About life?
Yep.
Well, it's a good way to stay out of the bars. And I couldn't mess with girls and get in trouble because I couldn't afford a car and girls. And I didn't drink because I couldn't afford booze and cars. So that saved me. I think, I don't know.
I actually, that's spot on. So through high school, that was, so I was building a 1962 Bug from the ground up, bought it for $250 out of a guy's backyard up in Del City, Oklahoma, towed it back down to Altus, Oklahoma, and tore into it from the time I was, I don't know, probably 14 until it finished it when I was about 16. And I worked to be able to buy car parts, and then I worked to be able to buy gas, and I worked for more car parts. And in fact, I painted it just about the color of the Studebaker behind you. And that was not by chance. That was my parents doing in introducing me to cars to give me something to focus on other than trouble. So I totally understand it.
That reminds me of something. I built my son a Baja Bug. Now, this was an awesome bug. It had a big engine. In fact, it had the same setup as that, except it was dual DeLortos, which you now have, or somebody has.
Hi. Yep.
And it was quite the machine. I had 150 feet of roll cage in it, trying to keep him from killing himself. And it had a big scoop on the top. So it was a pretty wild looking bug. It had like 33-inch tall tires and 4 shocks, 2 on each wheel. And I guess I've lost where I was going with this. Oh, I know. I'm old, by the way. And he'd be out riding his skateboard and playing with his bicycle. I'd say, Mike, aren't you going to help me with this? And he informed me one day, he says, some of us just aren't car people. And here I am building him a car, which you can imagine what that did to my temperament. But he has since told me several times, I really wished I would have paid attention to you. He says, I've had to teach myself how to weld. I've had to teach myself how to do everything that you could have showed me. He's now in the military vehicles and Jeeps, and he builds rock crawlers. And he's also, as you can see, if he shows you later, we're both into motorcycles. He's got like 5 Harley Davidsons.
All right. So what's your next project? And let's back up a bit. I don't like to focus on age, but since you brought it up earlier, how old are you, Dave?
I'm 80.
80 years old. And the question I just asked you is a real question, because I know you have other projects coming up. So what's next for you? What are you going to spend the next couple weeks working on? Fuel injection?
Well, I'm going to try to get into this fuel injection again and get it tuned. But if you look down there on the floor, there's the engine mount from one of my airplanes. And I have stripped it to the ground, and I'm starting over with it. It's some people might not recognize what it is. It's what they call a weight shift aircraft. If you remember the movie Fly Away Home, where the little girl led the geese from Canada to South Carolina, well, it's that kind of airplane, and it's out in my hangar at the airport.
Awesome.
And I bought it a long time ago, and I haven't flown it yet. But I think in about 2 weeks I'm going to Arizona to get weight shift added onto my ticket, because it's time to fly that thing.
Absolutely.
Plus, out there I also have another airplane, which is a real airplane. Well, that's a real airplane too. It's a home built. It's called a YX 2-place. It's got a 6-cylinder Jabiru engine on it, 200 cubic inches, 120 horse, and the airplane weighs 600 pounds. So you can get an idea, it's probably pretty quick. In fact, they have been clocked at over 220. And it cruises at about 145.